So the test will come, I promise you that inshallah, but I will definitely prepare you for it. So what will end up happening is I will select a chunk of verses from the PowerPoint slides and I will have that uploaded where you will have access to it. And then you can look at it, read through some of the things that we've talked about, and that's it. And if I quiz you, it will literally just be out of that PowerPoint slide. You don't have to go into like other tafsirs and none of that stuff. So I will make it very easy for you, inshallah. And again, the aim behind that is just to ensure that we're all on the same page and that you're understanding the material. That's really it, okay? So that will eventually come, but let's just pretend there's no test and see how much of the other students will come back, okay? And then we can surprise them. Okay. So with that being said, can somebody remind us very quickly where we are at in terms of our discussion on Surah Nisaa? What are we talking about in terms of subject and theme? So here are some point form notes that we could look at. If I remember correctly, was it somewhere around here, 95, 96 or something that we had paused at? 98, okay. So looking at 97, looking at verse number 97, what are we talking about here? What's been happening in Surah An-Nisa? إِنَّ الَّذِينَ تَوَفَّاهُمُ الْمَلَائِكَةُ While the angels are removing the souls of those who have wronged themselves. What is this conversation about? Who is the angels removing the souls from? From whom? Who's the audience here? Those who have wronged themselves. Who are they? The hypocrites and those who also made the decision to stay in Mecca deliberately. We don't see the importance of going out and supporting the Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam. And by the way, keep in mind these are people who had the ability to go. So health-wise, all of that stuff was intact and they had the ability to go, and they just simply made the choice, we're not going to do that. So they fell into this category, but it's more so the hypocrites. And the first thing that was called out is that they had wronged themselves. ظالمي. You've heard of this word ظالم? ظلم? Dhulm literally means when you cross boundaries, when you cross limits that are set by Allah. That's literally the definition of dhulm. So you're given certain rules and ethics to follow, and that person has decided to go above and beyond that. Meaning, they didn't add something that even subtracting or saying to themselves, well, not 5 times a day I need to pray, 4 is good enough. You've still crossed the boundaries. Because what did Allah say? The boundary is, bare minimum, 5. You can't touch that number. So things like that. This is all part of dhulm, and lots of tafsirs and translations, you might see it also as transgression, to transgress. So that's how it also applies to somebody else. If you commit dhulm to someone else, meaning you have
anything you displace in the dhulm?
Yes. You have crossed their rights, the rights that they have of you. They have the right to be respected, to be treated well, to be kind, etc. And you've taken that, or you've given something that they didn't deserve. That all falls under dhulm. So the angels will be talking to this particular group. Now, the dhulm here, we're not talking about generally, those who have characteristics and behaviors. No, we're talking specifically about Ahl Makkah who stayed behind and the munafiqun. They will say, what was the matter with you? Who will say that? قَالُوا فِيمَ كُنْتُمْ Who will say that? The angels. So they'll ask a question. Now, one thing that we mentioned very briefly was that angels will, those who were created to be in the Jahannam, and basically they're the workers of Jahannam. Our Prophet ﷺ told us there will be an angel by the gates of Jahannam. There will be angels within Jahannam that will be talking and questioning the inhabitants of the Jahannam, wal-'iyadhu billah. One of these questions is what you see in front of you. Other questions sound like, as we mentioned in the previous session in Surah Al-Muddathir, they will also be asked about how did you end up here? How did you come to this final ending? And the first thing that they would respond with is what? قَالُوا لَمْ نَكُ مِنَ الْمُصَلِّينَ. We were people who were not part of those who pray. Meaning they didn't associate themselves with those who pray. They weren't part of that crowd. See the difference as opposed to saying we were not of those who pray. So we were not the ones who pray as opposed we were not part of those who pray. That's the difference, right? One is tackling the actual act itself. They'll say, well, we didn't actually pray. The other is even worse. Not only did we not pray, but the people who did pray, we were like, yeah, they're too extreme. They're too strict. So how does this look like in our day and age? Have you ever gone to somebody's house or people come over to yours, and when prayer time comes, not everybody joins? There's always like that one group, and they're Muslims. They're like one group will go into like the TV room, or you go to a dinner event. Some of them will still be at the table, brothers as well, and the rest will just go and do their thing. The strict Muslims, right? The real religious ones. They're gone into like the basement somewhere and they're praying. Kind of the same idea is captured in that verse. Then these inhabitants of Jahannam, they didn't stop there. وَلَمْ نَكُ نُطْعِمُ الْمِسْكِينَ. We were not of the people who helped to feed and provide for the miskin. Not the fuqara. Fuqara, faqirun, the poor. Miskin, the needy. The needy. So you see the difference. Miskin, you're living paycheck to paycheck. The faqir, the poor, you don't even have a paycheck. Okay? So they said we didn't take any importance to them. We didn't go out of our way to provide and give anything to them. Again, how does this look like today? This is the person who literally has no care to help others, especially those who need the care, who need the support, the miskin. And especially if you are somebody that is in a position to help others, you should help others. Okay? And it's something that's highly encouraged when you have that ability to do so. So they respond. قَالُوا كُنَّا مُسْتَضْعَفِينَ فِي الْأَرْضِ. We were oppressed in the land. Look at their excuse. What did they say? Oh, we're just going through so much hardship, so much oppression. Continues. قَالُوا أَلَمْ تَكُنْ أَرْضُ اللَّهِ وَاسِعَةً فَتُهَاجِرُوا فِيهَا. You know, I'm really afraid of this sentence. This sentence scares me. Wasn't Allah's earth big enough for you to emigrate and move around and find somewhere else to live? That's a scary response to get. Because that almost eliminates every possible excuse that somebody may have for not being able to practice their deen. This here is a question it's impossible to avoid. Why don't you go somewhere else? Start over somewhere else. Now, keep in mind, this is also, you might want to note this beside 97, this is also one of the verses abused in the Qur'an, in Surah Nisaa. And it's not the entire verse, it's that section of the verse, that sentence. So you can underline the part that says, was Allah's earth not vast enough for you to immigrate in? That part of the verse is abused. How? This is like somebody who says, they're really strict about us praying in public, so I just don't pray at all. And then some people will say things, oh, well, you should have left. You should have made hijrah. You can't get to establish a Islamic government. You should make hijrah. No, that's not what it's talking about. You see the context now? The question was asked to whom? And the response came from whom? It was the most extreme, the hypocrites and the munafiqun, and those who deliberately refused the message of the Prophet ﷺ. So this is the extreme of them. They were being asked this question. They were given this response. So that tells you that the situation has to be like the worst before you consider, okay, I need to move and find somewhere else to live. Can somebody give me an example of today where this particular question might be something to consider? For whom? Okay, so brothers and sisters in Burma, for example, other parts of the world where people generally, it's not even just about Islam anymore, because the Islamic thing also is to be able to live freely. and have basic needs fulfilled, basic freedoms at your disposal. Like you're able to use the things that you need to use to live a normal life. When that is taken away from you, that's when you have to now seriously start looking at and considering what are my options and where can I go. And obviously that raises another problem as well, right? Because you try to move now to another city or country, they don't want you. They don't want you there. And that's really, really, subhanAllah, I can't even imagine what that would feel like. You know, may Allah help us and help those who are in situations like that. May Allah make it easy for them. Yeah.
So, since you're talking about hypocrite,
Yep.
like the extreme version, and then the angel's response to their
Yeah.
response is, was the world not big enough for you to emerge and like basically move? But did hypocrites, were they ever in a mindset to think, hey, I don't want to be a hypocrite, I want to move?
Well,
What are you trying to say?
so coming out of hypocrisy and actually be like, you know what, I got to stop doing this. There are stories of individuals that have later on changed and have later on decided that, okay, this is actually after the Prophet ﷺ's death. Okay, this is not the path for me. Openly and explicitly, I don't know of any. Yet there are stories that mention that this occasionally happened. It was very rare, almost unheard of, and the potential is that at the end of the day, the basic principle in Islam is that no matter what state you're in, as long as he's doing it, he's drawn the line now, and we've seen this occur several times when this whole subject of the munafiqun came up, that enough was enough. You're going to see very soon what Allah is going to do with them, very specifically how He's going to handle them in the akhirah. Right now is when Allah is really getting very, very blunt. So, no consideration. Wasn't the world big enough? Why didn't you move? What's wrong with you? Why did this happen? Why were they asked in such a way? Because you got to think, you got to just think for a moment what a munafiq is. Very stubborn, hard-headed, set in their ways. That's really hard to get through to somebody like that. And you can spend several days, months, and even years trying to help and convince, and it's almost impossible. And then the worst that could happen is, yeah, you know what, I'm going to change, don't worry. But inside, it hasn't changed. So because they've reached to that state where they have become so stone cold to anything good and positive that would bring them closer to Allah, then the punishment and the response is just as blunt or even worse. Yeah.
Those in Quebec, for the sisters,
Yeah. So this question was brought up last week, and I'll repeat that very briefly. Is that for the particularly those who are living in Quebec and Bill, what is it, 21? Yeah. Right now, at this very moment, there are appeals that are still pending within the court, and there is a process that is still unfolding. We don't exactly know what the outcome of that could be. It could potentially change. It could go back to what it was. So right now, there's really nothing to do except to just hold on and wait and see where this is going. And there are lots of organizations, lots of politicians and so on talking about this, that they're against the bill as such. So let's just wait and see. And me personally, I wouldn't advise anybody to do anything drastic at the moment, meaning like leave and uproot their family somewhere else. You'll just have to wait and see. It's still at a very early stage what would happen. And we pray that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala makes it easy for all of them. Because if this does happen and it continues, then that's our neighbors. Right? It's just next door. So it's something to think about and reflect on, right? فَتُهَاجِرُوا فِيهَا. We talked about what is hijrah. What is hijrah? Hijrah literally means what? To migrate. To leave one place to another. Now there are different types of hijrah. The hijrah that is captured in the Qur'an is the hijrah for Allah. Okay? So the hijrah here is the one for Allah. Their hijrah is also used in different forms in the Qur'an. So Surah Al-Furqan, Allah said, وَقَالَ الرَّسُولُ, the Prophet ﷺ will complain to Allah, Ya Rabbi, so he will say, oh my master, inna qawm ittakhadhu, my people, they took the Qur'an, inna qawm ittakhadhu hadha al-Qur'an, they took this Qur'an, mahjura, and they abandoned it. Mahjura, listen to it, comes from hijrah, the same word. So hijrah is used differently throughout the Qur'an. This one here, so the most beloved type of hijrah is the hijrah for Allah. What that means is you literally uproot, move from one place to another for the sake of, for the purpose of pleasing Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That is a very difficult thing to do.
Is there any
Okay.
other reason that hijrah is allowed for?
Yes. All other reasons like hijrah for work, hijrah for school, hijrah for opportunity, hijrah for closer to family. All of these things are good reasons as well. So linguistically, the word hijrah would apply to all of that. But here in the Qur'an, for the most part, it's always referring to the most beloved type of hijrah. Couple of scenarios come out of this subject as well, right? And as well, and I don't want to talk about all of them, but just one in particular. And it's really about the overzealous type of Muslim that, especially those who kind of like, okay, revert to Islam or start practicing the deen. So the guy takes his shahada today, by tomorrow afternoon he wants to make hijrah to Mecca and live beside the Kaaba. Not even live in it, just live in the Haram. He's like, I want to make hijrah for the sake of Allah. Not easy thing to do. Hijrah, how many years after the Prophet ﷺ was he ordered to do that from Mecca to Medina? How many years after? Approximately 13 years after. And when he left Mecca, as he was walking out, he turned around and he faced himself towards Mecca. And he said, and he's saying this out of his true love and how close Mecca was to his heart. He loved Mecca and said, had it not been by the order of my Creator, I would have stayed and died with you. Meaning I would have stayed until the end of my life. But, the seerah continued and it unfolded the way that it did. So the point is that this is not an easy thing to do. And those who try to, become overzealous and excited about the subject, again, there has to be a lot of thought, good intentions, planning, etc. Lots of different things, components. And you'll find that the reason why I say that is when you go through all of those details, you'll find more than likely you don't need to make hijrah anywhere. Don't you ever feel sometimes when you are in an environment where you're the minority, your iman is stronger than if you were in, Muslim countries, etc. and so on? And for me personally, I grew up in Medina. I was born in Medina. I studied in Medina. But still, there's a big part of me, as much as all of the wonderful things of Medina has and what it offers and so on, there's still a big part of me that feels like the struggle that you have to go through day after day, living in an environment where you're the minority and you gotta just to even do the little things. You want to pray, you can't just pull over anywhere and pray. You can't just stop anywhere and do that. You got to find some place where it's a little bit private, where nobody's staring at you, no one's going to come and kick you or hurt you or do something. All of that kind of makes me want Islam and worship Allah even more. That the additional struggle. And so with that, I could remember very clearly when we were in Medina, many students took that for granted. Many students who lived there took it for granted. They didn't understand how blessed it was. So there are people who live next to the Prophet ﷺ, next to the Kaaba, but they don't visit that. They don't have that consistency. So the point is, at the end of the day, فَتُهَاجِرُوا فِيهَا. This was something that was called out to the munafiqun because that option was in front of them. And فَأُولَٰئِكَ مَأْوَاهُمْ جَهَنَّمْ. These, their refuge will be in the Jahannam. وَسَاءَتْ مَصِيرًا. What a sad state it is to be in. Very quick question. Isn't that obvious? Why highlight what a horrible retreat? Why say that? Isn't it obvious? Without anybody telling us. Isn't it just common sense that hell is a terrible place to be? And it's not like what some Muslims think. وَقَالُوا لَن تَمَسَّنَا النَّارُ إِلَّا أَيَّامًا مَعْدُودًا in Surah Al-Baqarah. Some Muslims believe that. If I go to Jahannam because of like one or two things I did wrong, I'll probably just go there for a few hours, like a weekend or something, and that's it, and I'm out. So why mention that this is a sad, horrible, what an ending to have? What ayah number is this? 97 ayat later, you still didn't get it. You understand? 97 ayat to the munafiqun, you still didn't understand. You still didn't get the message. You still did not realize what you were supposed to do. Instead, you went the other way. You know how we interpret this in today? Allah gave the person 10 years, 20, 40, 60, 90 years, and they still could not get themselves to pray. They could afford Hajj, and they still didn't go. They could do all the things they were required to, and they still didn't do it. You had wealth, knowledge, money, power. You still didn't help those in need. So don't think that this is just contextual, right? This is a lesson for all of us as well. That the time that we have, the health that we have, as our Prophet ﷺ told us in that very famous hadith, take 5 before 5 things happen, right? And one of those things, or all of them actually, but one of those things is, take advantage of your life before your death. Take advantage of your time before you become busy. Take advantage of your wealth before you become poor. Take advantage of your health before you become sick. So all of this stuff, take advantage of your youth before you become old. Really something to think about. For me, that one hadith, if that was the only hadith we have, it's a lot. We could probably survive with that one hadith for a good portion of our life. It's captured everything from our youth to our health to life itself, everything. So, wasa'at masira is Qur'an's way of saying, how sad. It's so sad that you ended up there. You had all that time. The Prophet was in front of your face. He was alive. He was right in front of you. You lived in the same city with him, and still you didn't go back. Wasa'at masira. So you understand how this is being used. This is as if Allah is saying, what a shame. Out of all those chances I gave you, you still couldn't get it right. Okay. Next ayah. إِلَّا الْمُسْتَضْعَفِينَ مِنَ الرِّجَالِ وَالنِّسَاءِ وَالْوِلْدَانِ لَا يَسْتَطِيعُونَ حِيلَةً وَلَا يَهْتَدُونَ سَبِيلًا. Do you all see in your booklet that whole paragraph of Hila? It says Heela. That is supposed to be under ayah number 98, okay? That whole paragraph should not be above, but it should be under. So you could probably just stick an arrow pointing to verse 98. So you know that that whole conversation is pertaining to that verse. Except for the weak. So we mentioned this very quickly, was that the weak. Our Prophet ﷺ told us the majority of the inhabitants of Jannah will be those that are poor, that are weak. Can someone tell me why? There are some obvious reasons, and then there are also other reasons that are explicitly mentioned and told to us. What are some of the obvious reasons why that would make sense? Because now this is the exception. So all those will have a sa'at masira, a retrous end, except this group, the weak amongst men and women. So the poor, what about them? They were exempted. So make sure you write this down in context. Except meaning they were exempted to join the Prophet ﷺ in battle. These groups. Because why? First category, they're weak. They were sick. They were old. They were injured. They had disabilities. So they were weak. Both men and women. So this was the group Allah is not going to include in the previous ayah. And so men, women, and children. وَالْوِلْدَانِ لَا يَسْتَطِيعُونَ حِيلًا, who have no means to act. We talked about this. So this is the word hila that you see in that paragraph. So look what happened. Historically, people tried to evade the Islamic zakat collection by giving all one of their assets to one spouse, leaving one below the nisab. Nisab is threshold. Okay, so every year, there is a certain amount of wealth that somebody must have for an entire year that qualifies them to pay zakat. In Arabic, we call that nisab. So I don't know, last time I checked, I think it was like 3,000 plus or something, close to $5,000 or in wealth for us here in Toronto. So the point is that to avoid having to pay zakat, this is what they would do. This is one of their tricks that they would do. They would take a portion of that wealth and give it and say, hey, although this is my money, I'm just going to put it in your bank account. So now that person's balance goes below $5,000. So they're like, yeah, I don't have to pay zakat anymore because it's under your name. It's your account. You keep it for me. It's kind of sad because I've met Muslims who do that. I've met Muslims who do that. So this same attitude, this same practice happened till then. So that kind of trickery is called hila in the Qur'an. Okay, so when you try to trick somebody so that you can get away from something that you're responsible for. So this was a deceptive technique to save oneself. But for those who are legitimately weak, and those who are not able to make a way for themselves for a reason, they are exempted from the judgment of the previous people. It shouldn't be accepted, it should be exempted. Okay? So just make sure you make that correction in that paragraph. They are accepted. No, it should be they are exempted. لا يستطيعون حيلة ولا يهتدون سبيلا, and no means to find a way out. So they could be healthy, they could be mature, they could be strong, but they're restricted to some way. So they don't have the finances to get where they need to go to join the Prophet ﷺ. You understand how that ended. Okay, وَلَا يَهْتَدُونَ سَبِيلًا. They didn't have the means to get where they needed to be. Allah continues, verse number 99, فَأُولَٰئِكَ عَسَى اللَّهُ أَن يَعْفُوا عَنْهُمْ وَكَانَ اللَّهُ عَفُوًّا غَفُورًا. These who? The previous ayah. It may be Allah will pardon them, and Allah is pardoning and forgiving. What does pardon mean? When we say like in Laylatul Qadr, Allahumma innaka afu Kareemun tuhibbul afu fa'fu anna. Oh Allah, you love to pardon, so pardon us. What does afu mean?
Forgive, forget, and reward.
Okay, to forgive, forget, and reward. So if forgiveness is used in afu, then what is the difference between maghfirah and afu? Because they're both mentioned here, afuwan and then ghafura. So what's the difference between the two? To pardon and to forgive. Isn't pardoning forgiving? What's the difference? It's a very thin line, but it's very distinct as well, yeah?
I think the example given is like an ocean with a white foam, and that white foam is completely removed, so your sense is like erased, like it's non-existent.
And this is afu, this is pardon. Okay, and then ghafur, to forgive.
Forgive but not forget.
Okay, no, we don't want it to be that way. So, here's how you look at it. Afu, to pardon, it means to forget. Period. What that forgetfulness will be, so when you're asking Allah, oh Allah, bless us with your pardon, meaning not even forgive us, just overlook these mistakes that I keep making. I'm trying to get over it, but I can't. You know why afu is so important? Here's a clearer image for you to follow. Can we as human beings ask Allah to forgive every single mistake that we make? Do we have the ability to do that? To call out every mistake? Ya Allah, this morning, you know when I looked at that one image as I was crossing the highway for like 1 second. I shouldn't have looked, but I looked. Allah, forgive me. Can you micromanage all of your mistakes and your weaknesses this way? No human being can do that. That's why we need afu. See how that works? So you're asking Allah to pardon the things that you yourself forget about. You yourself can't keep track of. Oh Allah, pardon us for that. So in other words, out of your mercy, overlook this. These things that I didn't deliberately do them, but I can't keep track of them. They're so frequent. When I get angry at my kids, sometimes I might say something to them, and it happens every single day. Allah wants us to call upon Him even to just pardon the things that you can't remember or don't have the ability to ask forgiveness for. So those little mistakes and the things that you overlook, you want Allah to overlook it out of His mercy. So it's very beautiful actually to have afu, this pardon from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And we pray that He gives that to all of us. Okay? So Allah will pardon. فَأُولَٰئِكَ عَسَى اللَّهُ أَن يَعْفُ عَنْهُمْ وَكَانَ اللَّهُ عَفُوًّا غَفُورًا. Ayah number 100. وَمَن يُهَاجِرْ فِي سَبِيلِ اللَّهِ. Anyone who emigrates for the sake of Allah will find on earth many places of protection and refuge. وَمَن يُهَاجِرْ فِي سَبِيلِ اللَّهِ. Do you see what came after muhajir from hijrah? What came after it? فِي سَبِيلِ اللَّهِ. What did we say hijrah mostly when it's used in the Qur'an is referring to? The hijrah of Allah. Now it's being spelt out to us. Those who actually make this type of hijrah, and you did it solely so that you can stay and preserve and walk on the path that leads you closer to Him, يَجِدْ فِي الْأَرْضِ مُرَاغَمًا. You will find on this earth muragham. Look at the bottom, the first bullet that you see there. See there? Ragham or muragham. So ragham means dirt, but muragham that is mentioned in the ayah is land that is acquired after an argument. Now what does that have to do with dirt? Just imagine back in those days when two people are arguing and they're fighting and they're shoving, sometimes the dust would kind of like get out of control. And when that settles, one side of that argument takes over that piece of land. Say, you know what? The one who most of the time would feel that they won the argument, get out of here. This is mine now. I don't want you here anymore. That's called muraghama. Very common back in those days. Okay, still common in this day, but done very differently, right? So that's muragham. So Allah says this whole world is muraghaman kathiran wasa'a. So it's there, it's available to you, and they are plentiful. There are endless amounts of land. How much, does anybody know what is the percentage of this earth? How much in terms of percentage is occupied by human beings? From what I've never checked in many years, but I heard it's less than 50% of the earth is actually occupied by human beings in terms of land. Does anybody know? So maybe next class I'll look that up and confirm it. But point is that Allah is showing you that He created this earth for you. So enjoy it and take advantage of it and move where you can and own what you can as well. By the way, one benefit of this ayah and many like it is this is also one of many verses that encourage us to enjoy and to settle in this world, to settle in worldly life. Enjoy worldly life. Don't get addicted and overconsumed, but these are one of many verses that the Qur'an encourages you that wherever you do choose to live, make it comfortable. Enjoy your time, make it comfortable, make it peaceful. You ever hear like some Muslims who don't want a house? They're like, I'm just going to live in my car. And bathroom, I'm going to use the public bathroom. Because I don't want to get attached to the dunya. This is the sunnah. What are you talking about? Right? I've met students, by the way, back in the days that used to, those were the kind of plans they would have when they go back to their families. I'm going to build like a mud hut in the middle of like the jungle. I'm just going to live there. Just to stay away from this dunya. I mean, that's your choice. But prophetically, and from the Qur'an, it's actually not the case. Right? So this is one of many verses that encourage you to be comfortable where you are. Somebody had their hand? Yeah.
Yeah, it's like 20%
20%
of the earth.
of the earth is occupied by humans. So just take a look at that. So you understand when Allah is saying to you, like there's so many places you would have gone. Obviously, the logistics of how that could happen in this day and age is very difficult and very different. But just to give you an idea of why these verses are here, and then Allah continues and says, وَمَنْ يَخْرُجْ مِنْ بَيْتِهِ مُهَاجِرًا إِلَى اللَّهِ وَرَسُولِهِ. Wait a minute, something is different here now. Check this out. So for the sake of Allah, you'll find many places of this on this earth, place of refuge and plenitudes. Now look what happened next. Anyone who leaves his home for Allah, and who got added to the sentence now? The Prophet ﷺ. ثُمَّ يُدْرِكْهُ الْمَوْتِ. So the question now arises, is what was the first part of the verse referring to? Is it the same group? And if it is, why is the Prophet ﷺ added later on and not in the beginning? Or is those who are in the second part of that verse, it's a different group? Does anybody have any thoughts on this? Yeah.
Is the first part referring to us, and the second part is to the specific people who made hijrah for the Prophet?
The opposite. You're right. So the first part is referring to those who went with the Prophet ﷺ, and those who also went in battle with him. وَمَن يُهَاجِرْ فِي سَبِيلِ اللَّهِ. In other words, you gave up your land and your heritage for the sake of Allah, meaning at the end of the day, despite you follow the Prophet ﷺ or anything else, you did that for his sake and his sake only. So technically, we've already gone through this. When you follow the Prophet ﷺ, you are indirectly also following. That's also fi sabilillah, right? But then the second part of the verse is everybody else. Whoever decides at the end of the day that they want to leave their home and they want to migrate to Allah and His Messenger ﷺ, but during that whole process, ثُمَّ يُدْرِكْهُ الْمَوْتِ, death comes to them. فَقَدْ وَقَعَ أَجْرُهُ عَلَى اللَّهِ, their reward and compensation will be with Allah. وَكَانَ اللَّهُ غَفُورًا رَحِيمًا. Allah doesn't leave you hanging. If it stopped there, you'd be wondering, right? Well, how did Allah end the verse? What did Allah end the verse? Allah says, I am exceptionally forgiving and most merciful. Kind of hints towards those who leave wherever it is for the sake of Allah and to please the Prophet ﷺ, and death catches up to them in that process or during that journey. Now you have to understand something in context. You might want to note this down as well, just so you see the imagery in the ayah. When then is overtaken by death, understand for companions, when they had to go from Mecca to Medina, it wasn't just a few hours. It took an average companion 3 to 4 weeks, almost 1 month, one direction from Mecca to Medina. So the likelihood of a companion getting sick, getting stung by a scorpion or a lizard, all of those things, starvation, all of that could vary, like the risks were very high for them. So in context, it makes perfect sense that those who made the hijrah, it was very possible that some of them could get sick and pass away. And Allah is saying, your effort is not going to be wasted, but rather your ajr, فَقَدْ وَقَعَ أَجْرُهُ عَلَى اللَّهِ, your reward will be with Allah. وَكَانَ اللَّهُ غَفُورًا رَحِيمًا. And Allah hints to it that He was exceptionally forgiving and exceptionally merciful. Next, وَإِذَا ضَرَبْتُمْ فِي الْأَرْضِ فَلَيْسَ عَلَيْكُمْ جُنَاحٌ أَن تَقْصُرُوا مِنَ الصَّلَاةِ. And when you travel way out in the land, there is no harm to you that you shorten the prayers. So we're shifting out of the whole battlegrounds and military stuff. We're shifting out of that for a minute. And Allah is giving us some fiqh in terms of how to keep all of the things that you need to do, to keep those things intact with respect to worship, your rituals, your routine. So despite all of the things that are happening, so much chaos, confusion, etc., there are a few things that Allah highlights. Okay, you still got to do it, but the rules have been changed a little. So those of you who travel way out of your city, out in the land, you're gone somewhere now, there is no harm to you that you shorten the prayers. فَلَيْسَ عَلَيْكُمْ جُنَاحٌ أَن تَقْصُرُوا مِنَ الصَّلَاةِ إِنْ خِفْتُمْ, if you're afraid, أَن يَفْتِنَكُمُ الَّذِينَ كَفَرُوا, If you do so, if you are afraid that those who disbelieve are going to attack you. Okay. Now we open up a really important subject. Take a look in front of you. It's not in your books. Okay? This whole subject of travel and joining prayers or shortening prayers as a traveler. The average Muslim does not understand this subject. Why? Because it's very complex. The subject of when are you allowed to shorten prayers, how you should do that. And if you shorten, does that automatically allow you to join as well? When can you do both? Or is it just one or the other and never both? So all of that stuff is part of this discussion, because remember, the theme now is being brought out in this ayah. This is one of the only places in the entire Qur'an that Allah allows for the traveler, okay, you can shorten the prayers. Now the fiqh behind it is what I want to discuss with you, so that we're all on the same page and you understand this very well. You'll be surprised, not just at how complex this is, but you'll be surprised the conclusion that I hope to get to inshallah today. So the Arabic word for traveler or travel is safar, and we'll define it more in a little bit later. So understanding travel. Umar radiallahu anhu was asked how it was permissible to shorten prayers even though there was no fear remaining. Why am I saying that? Look back at the ayah that we're at. In khiftum. The ayah is only giving you one reason to shorten prayers. What is it? Fear. So Umar was asked, how is it possible to shorten in any other place when there's no fear? He replied, I asked the Prophet ﷺ the exact same question, and he said, this is a charity. In the Arabic word that's used in this hadith is, this is a rukhsa. Okay? This is a rukhsa or charity that Allah has given to you, so accept it. In other words, use it. So in other words, what is he saying, alayhi salatu wasalam? That fear is not the only reason that allows you to travel, but any other reason. So whatever it is that you travel for, whatever the intention is behind it, at the end of the day, the Prophet ﷺ is saying that is an opportunity of ease, charity that Allah has given you, so use it. We hear this kind of conversation in Ramadan as well. Should I fast if I have to travel? And the Prophet ﷺ, even the verses in the Qur'an, Surah Al-Baqarah, capture that as well. These are one of the scenarios where you're exempted. You don't have to fast in Ramadan when you're traveling. Okay? But then some Muslims, again, with good intentions of course, but just imagine if you travel to another country and the whole time zone shift, all of that happens. So you start your fasting in your country, you've done most of the day, but then you board a flight, and then in the air the sun comes back out again, and then you land and it's morning time. And then you start fasting with them as well. So the whole flight plus the other, you fast like 35 hours or something, and that's just one day. And they're like, yeah, I'm just doing this for Allah. I'm going to get more. Actually, no. Scholars had differed on this. Some ulama made it haram to fast if you were traveling. Yeah, they actually made it sinful. Why? Because the ayah said, if you're sick or if you're a traveler, then you can always do it later. So some ulama, they were no joke about that scenario. So the same idea is being called out here. Next point. The Prophet ﷺ never prayed any 4 unit of prayer while in the state of travel. Read that again. While he's on a journey, he never said, I'm going to pray 4 rak'ats of dhuhr. And then I'm going to pray 4 rak'ats of asr. So what does that tell you? He always did what? Shorten. We're not talking about jam', to combine. It's just shorten. Jam' will come a little bit later. So right now, so how did that look? Dhuhr time came, it was how many rak'ats? 2, right? He shortened. And Asr time came around, same thing. Got it? So this is how all of his journeys was. Okay. Next point. The issue of combining the prayers is a separate one, and there is a difference of opinion regarding the permissibility of when you are allowed to combine the prayer whilst you're traveling. And why I put that there is lots of Muslims believe that shortening and combining are two things that go together, which they don't. 90% of the time, you never actually join prayers. 90% of the time, you will not do that. It's very rare, and it's only, generally speaking, when it's needed that you join. But qasr, to shorten, is what we're talking about here. And this is where we're going to now look at different scenarios. Okay? So here's the first one, the yellow text you see at the bottom. When does one legally become a traveler? And for how long may one continue to shorten the prayer? These are good and important questions, okay? So when do you actually become a traveler? So the scenario is, do you become a traveler when you start packing your bags and your luggages at home? Do you become a traveler when you leave your house on your way to the airport? Do you become a traveler when you board the plane, or you cross the border, or you get on the highway? So when do you actually start to become a traveler? There are several opinions on that. Then wherever you go, how long can you continue shortening those prayers? So if you go abroad and you study for 6 months, 9 months, can you shorten for the entire 9 months? Is there a particular amount of days, and if you cross that day, then you're now a resident? So we're going to look at that. So there are two parts to look at this. The opinions of scholars regarding the distance that constitutes travel and converting distances from medieval text to modern measurement. So if you look at hadith, they usually use two types of measurements to measure distance. Okay, barid and farsakh. We're not going to talk about that, right? But just so you understand, when you're looking at this particular issue, that distance and how it's calculated is also very meticulous, and scholars differ on that as well. So when the Prophet ﷺ is referring to something that is equal to what you and I would call a kilometer or a mile, how much of that measurement used from the Prophet equals 1 kilometer or mile in our measurement? There's a huge clash with this as well. Very technical stuff, right? We don't need to talk about that right now, because I want to just stay with more of the general questions and things that we need to know in order to make a safe decision when we're a traveler. Secondly, the time duration that is required for the status of a traveler to change into a resident once they arrive where they're going. Okay, so how much time do you have until you become a resident of where you've gone to, okay? So the distance that constitutes travel. Look how many opinions. There are over 20 opinions amongst the ulama on how far you have to go before you are counted as a traveler. Have you heard things like 80 kilometers out of your city? Yeah. So those kinds of scenarios are what we're looking at. There are over 20 opinions. Some ulama said it's from your house. Actually, you'll see very soon one particular opinion of Imam Abu Hanifa, rahimahullah. He actually mentions that when you start packing your bags and you start preparing like a traveler would prepare. But we're going to see where that came from and why he said that, okay? So don't just be like, oh my God, that's perfect. I'm just taking that. I don't need to see the other slides. No. Just get the whole complete picture, okay? So here's a couple of the opinions. 3 days. This is the opinion of Ibn Mas'ud. It's also an opinion found within the Hanafi madhab. And the hadith it comes from, and their proof comes from wiping over the socks as a traveler. So the Prophet ﷺ says that the time that expires that allows you to wipe over the socks when you're performing wudu as a traveler is maximum 3 days. So after 3 days, you have to remove the traveler, you've got 3 days. Now the closest thing that I can, just to fetch wood. But by the way, we'll also talk about that, if that counts as traveling or not, okay? Maury, you had a question? Uh-huh.
Yeah, we have a question from the floor. Socks, are we talking about leather socks or wool socks?
Separate issue. Very detailed subject. Very detailed subject. Scholars don't differ on whether you can wipe over a sock or not. It's whether it's permeable or not. So how thick it is, and leather, and what kind of materials we have. Is there something equivalent to leather or works like leather? We can talk about that later, okay? What I want you to just go back to traveling for a minute, right? So, point is, 3 days, that's where they got their evidence from. 2 days, Ibn Abbas, the Hanbali, etc., was the hadith of a woman that is traveling for 2 days. She needs to have a mahram with her, okay? A guardian, security. Again, massive subject as well, because in this day and age, the need for a mahram is a subject that scholars talk about. Why? Because generally speaking, travel is very safe these days. You know, when you go from one airport to another, there's security everywhere, cameras everywhere. It's generally safe for her to move from one place to another, etc. But again, that's a whole separate discussion, lots of technicalities in it, not our topic here. Point is, they use that hadith. So basically, what did they do? The Prophet ﷺ is saying that if a woman is traveling for X amount of days, that she needs a mahram. The mahram exclude that. What is the Prophet ﷺ saying? 2 days counts as what? Travel. He used the word travel for X amount of days. But then something gets really confusing. You'll see it in a minute. There's the other opinion, 1 day. This is the opinion of Imam Bukhari. Ibn Abbas was asked by a person residing in Mecca. So Ibn Abbas, radiallahu anhuma, asked by a person residing in Mecca, should I shorten when I go to Mina or Arafah? And he said no. But if you go to Ta'if or Jeddah, so from Mecca to Ta'if, the city of Ta'if, is about 90 kilometers. From Mecca to the city of Jeddah, I forget, it's like 100 and something, 145 kilometers or something like that, right? Or travel an entire day's journey. By the way, when I say 100 or 90, that's by car. We're talking about foot here, it's days. So travel an entire day's journey, then do so. So what is Ibn Abbas saying? If you travel one entire day, then you can shorten the prayer. But if you travel less than that, then do not shorten. So what is he saying? The max is 1 day. If you continue traveling for more of those days, what do you do or not do? You shorten or you don't shorten? For more than one, you shorten or don't? You shorten. Everybody understand that? So Ibn Abbas is saying here, read it again. Man asks him, should I shorten my prayers if I go to these cities? He said no. But if you go to cities that are much farther out, or you travel an entire day's journey, then you can shorten. So how many days? He specifies 1 day. So in other words, if you are on a journey traveling for one entire day, then you can start to shorten. But if you travel less than that, then don't. So when we're saying a full day, how many hours are we talking about? So if you go on like a 5-hour journey, you don't shorten prayers according to this opinion. You got it?
Yeah.
Really interesting. This is the stuff that, again, like people who talk about this subject, they don't really go into this stuff, right? These are, by the way, there are more opinions as well. You'll see it in a minute. Here's the fourth opinion, which is the most interesting, and you'll see why. There is no day. Look what the fourth opinion mentions. It is not defined by distance, but by experience. What you do and how you prepare for your journey. So, we're going to define that. First of all, let's understand the word safar means exposure. The word safar means exposure. Why is travel called exposure, or it's given that same title? Because you pack your bags, you prepare for a journey, you come out of your home, your village, your community, your city, and you expose yourself to the rest of the world. That's why it's given this name. Got it? So, Ibn Taymiyyah, Ibn al-Qayyim, other scholars, their evidence for, I know those of you who are capturing this, I'll come back to it in a second. Their evidence for the fourth opinion at the bottom, that it's not defined by distance but by experience. Here's one of their evidences. There's a few. Is the lack of any evidence that defines exactly what travel is, and instead resorting to what it's culturally understood to be travel. So in other words, what he's saying is that we don't have anything clear and explicit that defines to us how many days and what a traveler is. Now going back to those hadith about the mahram and so on, those hadith, also there are different variations. So we just looked at the hadith of the mahram for the woman traveling for how many days? 2 days. There's also the exact same hadith if she travels 1 day. There's also the exact same hadith if she travels 3 days. So what does that tell you? Clearly the days is not what the Prophet ﷺ is concentrating on when it comes to the subject of the mahram. It's not the amount of days. Why is it not the amount of days? Because he gave different answers for the same scenario. What is the point of him talking about this subject, that hadith, about the mahram? What is he really trying to focus on? Whether she is traveling 1 day, 2 days, 3 days, she must always have what? That's the subject. So the fourth opinion did not accept that hadith as a valid proof that the numbers that are mentioned is equivalent to the days you're allowed to shorten prayers. Because that was not the intent of those hadith, and the proof, because he gave different numbers. Okay? That whole culturally understood to be traveling, we're coming to that in a minute. All three of the previous opinions use the same basic hadith that prevents a woman from traveling without a male companion. Each hadith uses a different limit, which we've done. This shows that the intention of the hadith is not to define the distance, but of what constitutes travel, which we all understood. So the number that's mentioned is not the point of that. A travel is therefore defined. This is the fourth opinion. We're still on that. This is the answer now. Ibn Taymiyyah and others, they said that travel is defined by actions that are required in order for that journey to be called traveling. And this is a matter that people recognize by their own customs. So what is he saying in one very clear sentence? To be a traveler is actually a frame of mind. And how you know you're in there is, look at the last line. You start getting your luggage together, packing food items, medicine, you leave your home. Versus if you're just going for a day trip, you're just going fishing, you're going picnic somewhere outside and by the lake, you drive for 2 hours. According to this fourth opinion, if you drive 2-3 hours, but you're just going for the day and coming back at the night, you're not a traveler. They are saying it's the things that people do to prepare for actual travel that constitutes travel based on the culture and custom you belong to. So, in Toronto and this part of the world, when you're traveling, what's the first thing you start doing? Let's say you're going to another city or country. What's the first thing you start doing?
Packing.
Okay, start packing. Keep going. Start making the arrangements, whether it's flying, driving, rent a car, etc. What else? Take time off from work. You don't do that when you go fishing. Hmm?
So, since we're talking about it's a frame of mind, I wouldn't be doing my travels prayer the day I request for work off, right? It would start from the day I start packing.
So it depends. So if you request time off work for travel, so you're asking, does your travel start at the time you request time off from work?
You do it.
Oh yeah, we're coming to that. No, I got your question. We're coming to that, right? We're going to come to the opinion of those who say travel actually starts, meaning you can shorten your prayers when you're still in your house. But because you packed your luggage and you have them by the door and you're ready to go, but it's Asr time, the one opinion allows you, but we'll see where and why and what other scholars said, you can actually start to shorten your prayer right in your house and then get into your car, whatever, and go to the airport and do what you got to do. But the point is, I just want you to understand everything that's happened with this particular opinion, because this is the most interesting one for a lot of reasons. So again, a frame of mind. So all the things that you just mentioned that a typical person in this part of the world would do to prepare for actual travel, that is what constitutes travel according to this fourth opinion. Yeah?
So let's say you're going for camping.
Mm-hmm.
Let's say it's just maybe 3-4 hour trip from here, but you're overnighting. You're going to be there for a couple of days.
Yeah. So for the most part, that would constitute as travel, but Some scholars didn't allow that. And we're coming to all of that. You see, I'm really glad I brought this scenario up because all your questions it's going to be addressed. I promise you, inshallah, okay? I just want you to see the big picture of how complex this is, but also how there isn't one solid, clear-cut opinion on this, right? Which is what leads to the confusion for a lot of people, right? So we understand now the fourth opinion. What is customary, what the people do in that land, that constitutes, hey, they're traveling, as opposed to, hey, they're gone fishing for the week. Oh, I'm sorry, for the day. They've gone, out of the city. They're driving 5 hours, but they'll be back tonight. Two completely different things according to this opinion. Okay, therefore a traveler is one who is customarily considered to be one. An average Muslim does not need to resort to a scholar or to a map in order to find out if he or she is a traveler. This fourth opinion. You know it by what you do to prepare for a trip. It's the psychological frame of mind that you go into. Now, here's what some of your questions come up with, okay? How long does this go on for? So let's just assume for a moment that we are all in this fourth opinion. So we're not looking at specific days, 3, 4 days, etc., right? Now, you go somewhere. So let's say you go down to the States. And you arrive at your destination, you're at the hotel, you unpack, you plan to be there for 1 week. Now the question is, how many of those days in that 7-day period, 1 week, are you going to shorten now? Look how many opinions are on this question. 18 and more. More than 20 opinions as well on this question alone. How long can you shorten prayers for? So here's a few of them the more common ones that I wanted to share with you. So the first is, of course, you stop becoming a traveler and become a resident after you stay in a country or place for more than 15 days. And that 15 days includes the day you actually left your house. So this is based on an analogy from the Hanafi madhab. I think it'll shock you what the analogy is. The Hanafis got this number because they compared it to the maximum amount of time that a woman is on her menstrual. And they said that when she is in that state, she cannot pray, right? And after maximum 15 days, or whatever days it ends up being, she has to now go back to that routine of praying and wudu and all of that stuff. So the same idea, the same analogy, when you're traveling, now that you've reached where you need to be, you can settle down, get yourself organized, but you cannot go beyond the 15-day threshold. After 15 days, just like she does, you got to go back to your regular routine. So they make the same qiyas, same analogy. Do you understand this? So they took that and this and say they're kind of similar. So this is what we say in fiqh, it's called qiyas. It's an analogy. They took two similar scenarios and that's how they extracted a ruling out of it. It's very interesting. So 15 days, so you understand where that came from, okay? Next opinion, 4 days. Maliki, Shafi, and so on. Prophet ﷺ ordered that the immigrants who were performing Hajj with him should not stay in Mecca for more than 3 days. Okay, so that's where this 3 days comes in. Scholars differ, however. They say, some ulama say that the 3 days here, it's because when the Prophet ﷺ and those who came with him to Medina, they gave up Mecca. They basically said, our land, our homes, everything, it's yours. You guys take it. And then later on when they come back, they're not allowed to become citizens anymore of Mecca. You understand? Especially their max time that they were allowed to come perform their umrahs and so on was at least 3 days, and then it was extended later on, right? For Hajj. But the point is, I just want you to understand in context, the reason why some scholars who disagreed with this said that number was not because of traveling. It was because that was the maximum time allowed for them to be in Mecca. So I want you to think about it like a visa. You have 1 month and then you got to leave. So this is a 3-day visa to Mecca. So after 3 days, you got to be out. But this opinion took that and said, okay, no. Because of this whole idea, he traveled, went there for 3 plus the day that he traveled 4 days. This is where we can do shorten the prayers. That's the maximum amount of time. After the 4th day, you are now a resident. Okay. He prayed qasr for 3 days while he was in Mecca, meaning the 4th day he went back. So that's where that opinion comes from. We're still not done. Ibn Taymiyyah, so this is the opinion of the one about whole customary one. He felt that a traveler would remain a traveler even if he stayed at a specific location for longer than 4 days, as long as his lifestyle was that of a traveler. You know what he's saying here? He's saying that it doesn't matter how long you go wherever you're going, as long as you're still living out of a suitcase. Or let's just say you get like one of those temporary closet thingies, you shove it in the wall. You don't even stay in a hotel anymore. You get like one of those apartments, you rent it out for a year, but everything is kind of temporary. You get used furniture. You don't want to spend money on all of that. You get like a bicycle or something. You don't even buy a car, and you live like that for a whole year. You're actually not a resident because that's not how a resident lives. You get furniture that you know you're going to keep. You get a place that you know you want to live, etc. So he still holds on. So how many days is he talking about here? There is no limit. There's going to be a problem with this. You'll see in a minute. Narrations of Prophet ﷺ praying qasr for more than 15 days. So we have other narrations of him doing that. So Ibn Taymiyyah stuck. If you're going to go to another country and stay there for like 2 years, 10 years, 5 years, you settle there, you send your kids to school, you buy a car, you get a job, but your intention is not to live, you're going back where you came from. He's like, no, you can't shorten prayers for 10 years. Although that is one very valid scholarly opinion. Okay? So he said no. And he'll explain his reasons why. Some modern scholars such as Ibn Uthaymin, rahimahullah, he said that there was no actual limit. So what I'm trying to do here is, we're stepping out of the classical scholars now, of hundreds of years ago, and we're talking about just 20 years ago. So these are just scholars within our time. There were ulama even till this day that hold this opinion, said that there was no actual limit. Even the duration of 10 years would constitute travel, as long as one had the intention to returning home. Can you imagine for 10 years or more, anywhere, you have the option of shortening every prayer. Well, the prayers that you can shorten. Just think about that for a minute.
Because you have not declared that place as a home.
Yeah. No matter what you do. So even if you've gone there for like on a 5-year contract at work, you send your kids to school, you settle down, get a place. But the intention is after the 5-year contract, what do?
Coming back.
I remember at the University of Medina, I was there for 9.5 years. And I remember students who were there, they did their 6-7 year degree, then they went into their masters, and they were shortening prayers that whole period, all those years, when they were in Medina. And when they finished, so this is like almost 20 years of studying. But the goal was they were never going to be residents of Saudi. They were going back where they came from. It was a valid opinion. But there was some kind of problem with this. You're going to see it in a minute. Because I can see from some of your reactions, you're not going to get very comfortable with this. Just the thought of like shortening dhuhr for the next 10 years. 2 rak'ats. It's not something we're accustomed to. So there's going to be an issue that will come out of this. So so here's one of them. Here's the last bullet at the bottom. What Ibn Taymiyyah and others felt is that this here, keeping this open lane option of limitless amount of days and years, actually takes us away from the spirit of what Islam is teaching us. The whole idea of limitations and discipline, following rules, it's very specific laws ordained to us. It takes you out of that. So one thing that you learn here, very simple principle in usul al-fiqh, is that anytime you feel like you're doing something and there's no end, it's your first clue that you have to stop and reassess what you're doing. Because everything in our deen has a beginning and it has a goal that you have to arrive at, or you have to be. It always gives you A to Z. It never just says A and then just take your time, do whatever you need. Never.
What is the definition of home then?
So we're coming to that. It's a very good question. So what exactly is home? Coming to that in a minute, right? And when you see it, it's going to be very obvious, right? Okay. One can be defined as a resident by action. So this is a start to your question. How do you know you are a resident? You are back home. It goes back to what? It goes back to how you live. So now you're back home. So let's say you went 5 years contract somewhere. You came back now to Toronto. When you come back to Toronto, settle down, you unpack, you put the luggages back in storage and lock them up. You don't have any goals in mind of taking another contract anywhere. You got a new job. Kids are back in school, married, etc. You start doing everything that people who live here do. That's how you come back to being what? You being what? You're a resident again. So again, not clearly defined. No, not clearly defined. It goes back again to actions, what's customary, frame of mind, etc. We're almost done. Yep.
What about in a situation where somebody is, like commonly people move to Canada and their position to reside in Canada is undecided or undeclared.
Very good.
They're not even sure if they
Well, very good. We're coming to this. So this is like, suppose you go to another country and you had the intention to stay there for 1 month, but within that month, you were like, I'm going to extend my stay for another 3 months. So do you continue shortening based on the intention of 1 month? Or can you renew that now and extend it to now 3 months? So what you're asking. We're coming to that in a minute. Not certain, actually it's right here. Not certain how long you will stay in another country. So you make a plan for A and then something comes up and you end up staying there or shortening your time. Separate issue, qasr may be allowed a bit longer. So basically, this issue here, lots of things now have to come into play. Why you're staying, what prevented you to go back home. So it's everything. Like if you just decide, you know what, I graduated, I finished my time here, and instead of going back home, I'm just going to stay for like another year and just tour. So again, ulama go back to several opinions. Are you still a traveler now that you're just touring? Now, or the travel period stopped when you had that intention that you were going to just go up until you study? What's going to happen? Again, scholars differ. Separate issue, maybe one of these days we'll look at all the different opinions and some of their evidences and try to understand what you do in a scenario like that. But the point is that what you need to know, if your plans change when you travel somewhere and it's extended or shortened, you will and do have the option of extending your qasr, shortening of phrase even further. You do have that option. Again, the question is, does that option include what you've already done, or do you start all over again when you decide to extend that stay? Is everybody with me so far? I feel like you've all traveled, no pun intended, right? Okay. Ibn Umar radiallahu anh prayed qasr for 6 months while in Azerbaijan. However, this was in the state of war. See the difference? So this was like, you go in a state of war and your job is to guard like the border. And you were sent there for an indefinite amount of time. So you can't apply this scenario there, this rule there, because now you don't know when you're going to come back. You were sent there to protect the borders. Could be 1 day, 1 year, could be forever, who knows. But Ibn Umar here, 6 months exactly, because of he was in the state of war in this particular place, the scholars said no. We cannot use that because it was very specific, and so the Prophet ﷺ would have allowed this out of the question. Okay, point is out of the question. With regards to joining the prayers, so qasr, you understand, joining the prayers, this is only done when needed. There is only one real opinion on this subject. You only join when you need to join. So Ibn Umar, that previous boy, not only did he do qasr, but he also joined. Why? Because he's in the state of? No, in the state of war. Just imagine, like 5 times a day, you gotta stop and find a way to pray. It's dangerous, right? So it makes sense now to limit as much of the time that you have to take to break away from what your duties. Limit that. So joining makes sense here. What's a scenario though in our day and age, where we can use both?
Conferences, sometimes the travelers from another country usually when they do pray to join it.
For what's the purpose of the travel?
Islamic conference, for example.
Okay, a conference. What do you think?
If the travel time is catching both 2 prayers, so Dhuhr and Asr or Maghrib and Isha, then you can join them if it's in that time period.
So, yeah, sort of. The idea with joining prayers is that you try to avoid doing it as much as possible. It's not a good thing to do regularly. And some scholars say that it was only done under extreme circumstances. Hajj would be an extreme circumstance. Conference, I don't know.
The reason why
Right.
I mentioned that one because it was attending this conference all
Yeah.
the time that they are doing that and those conferences.
Yeah, and by the way, just because if you see somebody joining, don't be like, shouldn't be doing that. It's only when we're in something equivalent to war. No. Point is that this was something that ulama discouraged, right? And reason why is that it rarely happened with the Prophet ﷺ. Rarely did he join and shorten. We know he shortened many times, but joining was something very rare that happened with him. And contrary that I've written, contrary to what most travelers believe, most people think you can do this, but you shouldn't do that. And you should try to resort it again when it's circumstances that's just completely unavoidable. I can't spell that out to you. You have to know whatever it is that you're doing and where you're going, that when I get there or the next few hours, I'm not going to be able to stop and pray. We're going to be constantly moving. Something's going to happen. I'm going to miss Maghrib, so I'm going to have to just join it. Yeah, when you're physically traveling. Lastly, when can you start shortening and combining? Here's another scenario, another issue. When do you become a traveler and you can start shortening prayers? This here, majority, once you leave your city according to... So when we say leave your city, you leave the borders of your city. So if you live here in Scarborough, if you go down and you're in North York, or you go from here and you go to Oshawa, are you a traveler? So when do you exit out of Scarborough and Oshawa and all of that stuff?
No, Oshawa's not part of Toronto.
So Oshawa's not part of Toronto. But from here, from Scarborough to Oshawa, how long of a drive is that? 20 minutes or so? 15, 20 minutes? According to this opinion, when you leave Scarborough and you go to Oshawa, you can shorten your prayer. Because you're out of your city. So in other words, they have not defined X amount of kilometers. There are proofs for this, by the way. Ibn Taymiyyah talked about this. Because he compared it this way. Real brilliant how he did this. He said if somebody went out in the middle of the desert just to get water or food for their family, and they went out there and they walked just 1 kilometer. Back in the days, if you did that, walk 1 kilometer in the middle of the desert, you were gone for 5-6 hours, maybe even longer, depending on things you were looking for. Especially if you have to get wood, you have to go for fine water. That could take ages, but you're just gone. You're only 1 kilometer outside of your city. As opposed to, You and I that can get in our cars, drive 100 kilometers within an hour. Is these two scenarios the same thing? What's the answer? That's the problem. See your response? That's what scholars do as well. One will say, yeah, you are. And I was like, no. 1 hour, this, and then look at the distance. No. This is where the difference of opinion came in. So Ibn Taymiyyah goes back to the same logic how he started with. Once you leave your city, case closed. And this is the majority. So technically, if you're driving for 20 minutes, but you exit your city that you live in, you are a traveler. Think about it. Because again, you have to put yourself back into that scenario of what the amount of kilometers we cover in 20 minutes in a car, as opposed to somebody on foot. You can't say, oh, you just walked, you just have 1 kilometer, even though you walked for 7 hours, you're not a traveler. Can't do that. But then at the same time, you exclude all the kilometers that you covered because you're in a different mode of transportation. This is where scholars differ. But, however, at the end of the day, the majority do what? Say that you can shorten. Here's the thing. The question now, and this is what I'm going to leave you with when we're done, is that if you are in that scenario where you go to Ashwa or what have you, and you want to shorten, but you say, no, I'm not going to take that option. I don't need to take that option. I'm just going to stick to 4. It's easy for me, etc. Understand that that is also a valid scholarly opinion. Meaning you have that option as well. So don't think to yourself, oh my God, what am I going to do when I go to Ashwa again? No, don't do that. You have that option. Use it if you... The point is that if you need to do that, if you need to use it. So how will this look? If you have to drive to Ashwa to, let's say, pick something up, and you got stuck in traffic or whatever it is you're picking up hadn't arrived, so you're waiting. It's Maghrib time. And by the time you get this, you're like, if I wait, I'll miss Maghrib. But if I pray, then hopefully he'll be here by the time I'm done praying. So you pray. You wait. Next thing, before you know it, Isha time rolls around. And there's only one chance. This package is going to arrive. You need to pick it up. And if you don't, if you're still praying or doing whatever you have to do, etc., the building's going to close, whatever, everything's going to go wrong. Can you take the option and say, you know what, I'm going to just shorten my prayer so at least I get to pray on time and I'm done? Can you do that? Technically, yes, you can. Your choice if you decide to do that or not. I understand, students. Like, I'm with you when I see that it's not something we're used to doing. That's a good thing too. Don't beat yourself on the head and just be like, oh God, I'm just going overboard all this time. No. Because we are living in a time too where we have a lot of these advantages and luxuries. And alhamdulillah, we can cover lots of kilometers and distances in a very short period. So, at the end of the day, if you can pray in the masjid, you can keep your salahs complete, etc., Insha'Allah, you will always have the full reward of your efforts. But if something popped up and it restricted you in some way, then at least you know in the back of your mind that there is this option here for you. And it's important for you to understand that because why? Allah tells us very clearly that He made this religion what? He made it easy. He didn't make this difficult. وَمَا جَعَلَ عَلَيْكُمْ فِي الدِّينِ مِنْ حَرَجٍ. I never, look at the sentence. I never made any form of hardship or pain associated with this path. Guess what verse? That verse, guess what surah it's in? The surah, the one time Allah said that this religion, He's never put hardship in it. Guess what surah Allah decided to put that in? Surah Al-Hajj. One of the most difficult rituals you will ever do in your life. That's the one He says, oh, by the way, this is an easy religion. Don't worry about it. So do you see the psychology? So despite how difficult and impossible your task is in front of you, you still have to approach it with the mentality of what? It's easy. And if there are things I can do to make Hajj easy for me too. It's beautiful. And this is where we say all the time, and this is what I'm done with, is that we as Muslims make Islam difficult, and not Islam difficult for Muslims. We are the ones that do that. So if this comes as a shock to you, then it's just for something for you to discover about how you've learned and your discipline with the deen. For me personally, for what it's worth, I humbly and personally follow the last opinion. Once you feel like and you do what a traveler does, you are a traveler, case closed. There is more to this discussion. Some scholars, just listen to this so I can really confuse your brain and I'll leave you with this till next week. Some scholars actually restricted travel to just the journey, not when you arrive at the destination. So whilst you're on the journey, that's when jam' and qasr can happen.